So this is session 3 of Kingdom Come. And today I want to look at one of the passages which refers to the end times. And this one is in Mark 13. Jesus was leaving the temple with his disciples, and one of the disciples said, "Oh, look, isn't this the most magnificent building?" And Jesus said, "Well, the time's coming when there just won't be one single stone left upon another." Now that would be the most shocking thing for a Jewish person to hear. It would be unthinkable. The temple was the presence of God. And so immediately they start saying to him, "Well, when's this going to be? And how do we know the signs of what's going to happen?" And Jesus' answer was, "Don't be deceived." And then he said, "You will be arrested, you'll be tried, but don't worry about that, because the Holy Spirit's going to give you the words you need to say." But then he says, when you see the signs, flee to the hills. There's going to be a terrible time of suffering. Now some see this as signalling the time of the end of the world. But Jesus says further down, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. That terrible time of suffering did come in 70 AD. The Romans finally got sick of the Jewish people. They invaded Palestine and they conquered the city after city, and finally they besieged Rome. Now, as the conquest started, people naturally went to the place which was most heavily fortified, and that was Jerusalem. So most of the people fled to Jerusalem for protection. But the Christians who'd heard Jesus' warning didn't. They fled to the hills, and so they were the ones who were able to survive. Now the time of suffering was terrible. The siege went on for years. They besieged the town so that no food was getting in, and people were just dying of starvation. There's even stories of cannibalism, of eating each other. The Romans did offer surrender and survival, but the Jewish people just wouldn't take it. There was a small group who fled to a place called Masada, which is at the top of a mountain, thinking that at least they'd be safe up there. And after Jerusalem fell, the Romans actually took that place too. And when they got up the top of the mountain, after building ramps all up the side, they found all the people there had suicided. In total, 1.1 million Jews died in that siege. The temple was destroyed and the city of Jerusalem was destroyed. In that passage too, there's language about the sun and the moon being darkened and stars falling from the sky. You've got to understand that this sort of language is used a lot in prophecy. It's a sort of a pictorial language. In Isaiah 13:10, Isaiah uses that same picture when he's speaking about the downfall of Babylon. And then in Isaiah 34:3-4, we have similar language about stars falling out of the sky to describe the downfall of Edom. It was just descriptive terms, and it's describing the destruction of all who are opposed to God's people. So Jesus uses this same language in describing the destruction of the Jewish people, but the ones who had rejected him. They'd not seen what God was doing, and so they were actively opposed to him. The destruction of Jerusalem and of the temple was the end of the Jewish era. Yes, there's still Jewish people today, but God's reign is no longer through the temple and the sacrificial system. God's rule is through Jesus.
For you are Lord of heaven and earth, and our praises you richly deserve. In your presence so sweet, we'll kneel at your feet, lifting our voices, exalting your name. Now let your glory and power be shown to all nations that you're on the throne. When your church is at one, your kingdom will come, and all the earth will see your majesty. Now let your glory and power be shown to all nations that you're on the throne. When your church is at one, Your kingdom